This is Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're speaking with Emily DeMasi. She leads the North American work at EOS at Federated Hermes. Prior to joining the EOS team, she spent nearly a decade in the socially responsible investing field, of which I have lots of questions for her today. First as an academic, publishing her graduate thesis on corporate social responsibility in commercial banks, then as a portfolio manager and an investment advisor, integrating the social and financial objectives of the clients that she worked with into her investment process, which we're also going to dig into. She got her MBA from Boston University and her MBA from Duquesne. So thank you for being here, Emily.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So the first term I'd like to kind of clear here is just transition. I think a lot of people hear about it in the news or read about it in the news, don't always know what it means. So please put some clarity behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the reason why there's not clarity is because people define it differently. But when we're talking about a just transition at EOS, what we're thinking about is as we move towards, hopefully, a net zero future, there are a lot of sectors that are going to have to change dramatically to be able to meet all of the targets and goals that they have set. And when they are doing that, there are going to be sectors, communities, regions, people, employees that are impacted by that change. And so when companies are thinking about their transition strategies, we want them to think about it in a just way. So that means, who are the people who are going to be most disproportionately impacted by this change? And for it to be just, it means that to take into consideration, how do we upskill employees so there's opportunity for them in a greener economy? And communities, for example, that might be heavily supported by some of the more fossil fuel intensive industries, how do we ensure that we bring them along in a positive way if those industries start to change?
Yeah, I think I find this exceptionally interesting, not only because I work at a continuing education organization, and I believe in education and all that good stuff. But there are a lot of studies that show that no matter what the technological advance that came along since the advancement of automated machinery, it always required, created more jobs than it destroyed, but always required higher skills for those jobs.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the transition point we're at right now, right? As these things go. So, one of the things that also is on a lot of people's minds right now is how AI will affect that.
Yeah.
Could you just give your views about how AI, which is probably revolutionary, though we don't know yet, probably is revolutionary. What would a just transition for that look like?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And engaging on the impacts of artificial intelligence is a core part of our engagement program. At this point right now, all we can ask of companies is to let us know how they're assessing the potential impacts of artificial intelligence on their workforce. From what I've heard so far, companies have actually reported an increase in the need of employees who understand things about artificial intelligence and technology.
Okay.
So it actually hasn't reduced employee numbers, but I could see us getting to a point where there's more automation of some of the more elementary tasks in certain sectors like financial services, right? But so far what we're hearing from companies is that it will always require human intervention to be able to leverage artificial intelligence. And so our ask is, how are you assessing it? How are you upskilling? And do you see potential for a negative impact on your workforce by implementing AI? But it's still so new. And so, it's a core part of our engagement, which we've actually been working on since 2019. But I think these conversations are going to develop really quickly as AI itself is leveraged more and more across sectors.
Yeah, I think it is interesting to think about this from the banking perspective.
Yeah.
Right, because there are most people who've logged onto their bank website to ask a question about something have been talking to an AI bot for at least part of it, if not most of it,
Yeah.
if not all of it. Because finding the more mundane things, but is relatively easy for AI, which I kind of think is poorly named. It just guesses well. But it's you already see that on the customer service side, right? That would have been a person
Absolutely.
in the past.
Yeah.
And what happened to that person. But it also occurs to me that there are applications for this in every other part of a bank's business, from underwriting to compliance to, fill in the blank.
Right. And I think it's in that underwriting aspect that we start to get concerned around sort of the ethical underpinning of, what does your team look like that are creating the algorithms that are helping to make decisions? And there is an implicit bias. I mean, everybody has it, and we can never avoid it completely. But we're asking companies, how are you considering this like bias? How are you testing for it? And how often actually do you see results coming up with bias in it? And so that's a way we're trying to get to that second order, not just the bot interface and helping customers get solutions quicker, but when it becomes part of real decision making, like who's going to get a mortgage and at what rate, that's when it becomes very important to be testing for something like implicit bias.
Right, and there already is pretty well documented implicit bias in the underwriting process now.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's exceptionally well seen in research. I also think it's very interesting. Some CFA New York members who remember all the way back to this time last year when we had an event that we co-host every year with the Society of Quantitative Analysts, where some academics were showing how the people who trained the models on large language models also put their bias into the large language models. So this is something that is being studied hot and heavy in academia right now. And they're putting out some exceptionally interesting things. Now, shifting a little bit, you've had a lot of experience with not only transitions for companies, but DEI in general.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're maybe at an inflection point right now, at least in my little world anyway. So what do you think the future is for companies? We've had a massive increase in companies' awareness of it and setting up groups within the organization, consciousness of it in hiring, et cetera. Where do we go from here for a company that is trying to do this right? What do you think the future holds?
I mean, I think the future of the DEI movement is really on the I. It's the inclusion. I heard it once said, diversity is a fact. You're here in New York, you walk out into the street. Diversity is just a fact. But inclusion and belonging and really fostering a sense of community and worthwhileness of your time in the office. I think that's sort of the new horizon for DEI because, it's never should it have been just a box checking exercise anyways.
Yep.
But what you're going to see is not just asking for EEO1 data, which is sort of the stepping stone to understand where a company is with their diversity metrics. But it's really, what does retention look like? What does promotion look like? What does opportunity look like? And how can companies positively impact that? And I think you see it through things like employee surveys, right? What's your rate of participation in those? When you find and you analyze it, if there are certain groups who are not participating, what's your next step? What's the remedy? How do you engage with that group? And I think that that's what we're going to see. It's not going to just be about who can we attract. It's going to be who can we retain? How do we develop them? And how do we make them feel like they really belong here and choose us?
Yeah, I mean that's a really much more difficult challenge
For
in
sure.
a way, right? Are there any good practices? Maybe you can give us an example of how a company should view its role and what steps it should take to rescue a group within the company that's not in the game.
Yeah, well, I think one of the key components to understanding inclusiveness at a company is really looking at their employee resource groups. And if there is a lack of support for those groups, or if there's not participation in one of the groups in particular, that's a clear evidence that you're not reaching whatever, demographic or part of the company that is not feeling like they want to participate. So I think that's the first thing to do is look at your employee resource groups, see that they're well staffed, see that they're supported, and look at those participation rates. And again, I think it is about going into regular employee surveys, but making it so that when issues arise, there is attention and remedy for those issues, because you're going to lose people really quickly if, for example, people keep coming back and say, well, I just rejoined the workforce after paternal or maternity leave, and I don't feel like I have support, or I feel like I'm struggling. And if you just let comments like that go, then you're going to see, a departure of a certain group, and you want to know why that is. You need to have the surveys, analyze the surveys, and then remedy in the areas where you can't. You can't, please everybody all the time.
Oh, no, of course not. No, but there are certainly some people you want to retain more than others, right? But this seems daunting also because there are so many times in one person's life like that, whether it's, caring for a relative or a close friend who's sick, or having to say goodbye to a relative or a person, a close friend, or, children not just being born but going off to college, or like there's a lot of pressure points in a person's life that are around that. I guess, do you think companies can do this? It sounds big.
I mean, it is big, but when you think about how much of a person's life is actually in the workforce and
Right.
with their company,
Right.
it is an investment that will return in dividends if you are really putting that support structure in place for your employees. And so, yes, I think companies can do it. And I think actually one of the silver linings, if you will, of the pandemic and COVID was really connecting with employees on a different level around support.
Okay.
And I mean, like, they're not just sick days, but, what's your mental health support system like in the workplace? What benefits are you offering to make sure that someone is being cared for, not just through physical and their health insurance, but also through mental health support and being able to talk about it, right? Like, I think this is the first time in corporate America where people can actually talk about their mental wellness and it not be thought of as something taboo.
Right.
And companies have done this, and it was from hearing this great need from a workforce that all of a sudden those that could went remote
Right.
and were very isolated.
Right.
But I think what corporate America realized was that, wow, they're still delivering during these very difficult times. How do we keep them well? And a lot of that has continued even as people come back to the office.
Yeah. It's and as people come back to the office, that process might take a while. As the former Morgan Stanley CEO said, Friday is a national holiday. So that might make it difficult in the long run.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that I wonder about with all of these things, as it's difficult for companies to know when something is not going right, how can portfolio managers or other people who do due diligence on companies really ascertain this so that they can put money with the best?
That's a good question. And I think you can look at it from a lot of different aspects. But if we wanted to stay, say on the DEI route, I think what you could do as an investor is look at the data, limited as it is, like EEO1 that's being published by companies.
Yep.
More and more, you will see sort of diversity strategy reports coming out. And so they could follow that. But what you really want to see, and I hope we get there someday, is some more workforce metrics that are more common and comparable
Right.
across companies.
Right.
So I am a member, or EOS is a member of something called the Human Capital Management Coalition. And we are a group of investors, asset owners, and representatives thereof, really looking to get some core foundational workforce metrics that companies can report on that makes the job of a portfolio manager or an analyst much easier. Because, I mean, human capital, one of the largest assets, one could argue, in any any sector.
Yeah.
And very little is disclosed on it. And so from that perspective, it's a little bit more difficult to make decisions based on it. But where you're going to want to look at is, how much money are companies putting into training, development, what do turnover rates look like? Things like that are indicators of whether or not companies are actually delivering on some of these strategies that they're putting in place.
Yeah, it's fascinating. My mentor in my first job out of school actually told me that her company was nothing really more than computers. If you take the people out of it, it's just computers.
Yeah.
Like we could do this anywhere. It's not, we're really people. and it was, it's exceptionally interesting to see how the world evolves around this. But I'll join you in hoping for comparable data someday.
Yes.
It may not take that long. Emily is here at CFA New York today to speak at their sustainable event. If you look at the evolution of comparable data on ESG over the last 5 years, it's like light years different now. People are still complaining about it, but it's so much better.
Yeah.
And I don't think it takes that long. It just takes ingenuity.
It does. It does. And, it's sometimes looking under the hood at, more details around what does your workforce look like and how much does it cost to really, keep this asset of yours finely tuned and running well. I mean, every investment professional would really benefit from having more detailed information on that.
Yeah. So, right, great. Well, so we have something to be hopeful about. Emily, perhaps we should leave it there.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to this podcast. This has been Compound Insights, and I will always be your host, Rob Rowan.